Okay, so let's start. Welcome everyone. Before starting, a few notes on the flow. During my presentation, you are more than welcome to ask questions. Please type them in the QA section so that I can find them easily, and I will answer them at the end of the presentation. Today, I will be talking about user activation and onboarding. I will give a simple and effective framework on how to approach it. My name is Aleksandra. I'm a growth product manager with a focus on user engagement, retention, and monetization. Today, I will be talking about user activation and share a step-by-step guide on how to approach user onboarding. Here is an outline. I will walk you through the goals and metrics definition stage, talk about data and qualitative research, talk about formulating activation strategy, and about implementation. Let's start with the basics and outline key terms we would need for this discussion. What is activation? Activation is a step of the funnel after acquisition where the new user starts engaging with your product. The easiest way to illustrate the stages is through the Pirate Metrics framework you can see on the slide. You can also see that activation comes right after you acquire your user, and it is crucial for retaining them during the following retention stage. Activation stage is all about educating your user about your product and helping them extract the initial value from it. Why does it matter? In short, without activating your users through proper education or onboarding, you won't be able to retain them. On the activation stage, while starting to engage with the product, users should extract the first value from it. And if they don't, then why would they stay with your solution and why won't they switch to competitors? So it's extremely important to focus your activities on activation before starting to working on retention. Product onboarding is any initial experience you create for activating your users. It has many phases. This can be onboarding screens introducing your product, example from Duolingo you can see on the slide. This can also be some lightweight experience. You can see the example from Tinder. Here they have created a test environment for users to try out their swipe features without actually swiping real profiles. One of the classic examples is tooltips. You can see the example from Slack, and also one of the classic and easy examples of onboarding experience is welcome emails. I gave the example from Firebase. So you need to work on your user activation in order to engage new users and retain them. To activate your users, you need onboarding experience. So let's move on to approaching activation. I will start with goals and metrics. We know what product activation is, why it matters, but how to start working on it and when should we target our actions. First, as activation is a necessary step for retaining users, our ultimate goal while we work with activation is to increase retention. But this metric is a bit broad and it can be influenced by a whole lot of other factors, especially in large products. And it is not specific enough to target our actions. That's where we should start finding our activation event. Activation event is an action users make after which we understand that they extracted initial product value, and hence we can prognose that this user will likely retain in the product. Activation events will be specific for each businesses. Here are some of the classic examples. The famous example from Facebook, they found out that users who added 7 friends in the first days after signing up were more likely to stick around and become active users. So it became their activation event. For Dropbox, it is saving one file in a folder on one device. For Airbnb, it's making a booking for the first time. It's when travelers understand the convenience of booking apartments through the platform. As for B2B examples, here you can see the example from MailChimp. They have as their activation event creation and sending of the first email. So here is the first challenge, to find the activation event. How can we do this? There are 3 ways. The first one is your expertise. You can hypothesize the activation event based on your product expertise, and in some cases, this may work, but I wouldn't recommend it because there are a lot of examples when products were used not for the cases they were initially planned for, especially for early stage products. One of the famous examples here is Instagram, which was initially launched as a location-based check-in app, but people used it as a social network for photo sharing. So the company quickly pivoted, and there are a lot of examples similar to that. So I won't cover the expertise part in my talk, but there are two other ways, data research and qualitative research. Data research is the most reliable way, but not for every product. For example, B2B products with limited number of users don't have much data to have significant results. And that's where qualitative research comes in handy. It helps to uncover insights which cannot be obtained through data research, and it helps you to better understand your end users, their preferences, and their motivations. Best results, however, will yield the combination of data research and qualitative research, as they complement each other and you can cross-check your hypotheses and results. Let's start with data research. The goal of the research is to define your activation event. Step 1, analyze the behavior of your active users. You can go to your analytics tool and find out what the most active users did during their first days, doing your product most frequently, and also you can try to find events that correlate with retention. This step is with an asterisk, as it is a complex task and demands a lot of data, but it is very useful, and if you have resources and capacity, I would definitely recommend to do this. However, you can also approach this another way. The typical ways to analyze the behavior in the data is to create funnels with main event sequences, or simply generate a list of the most frequently triggered events. This will clearly show you the main value your product represents, and hence will help you in defining your activation events. Because during the learning stage, you need to show off your key product value as soon as possible. So the next step is to analyze the behavior of churned users. For this step, you take the churned users and look at their actions in the same way as in the previous step. What path did these users take during their first days? What were they doing in your product when they were using it? And most importantly, look out for differences in the behavior between active users and churned users. What did active users do that churned users didn't? This difference in the behavior would highlight the gap you need to fill with your onboarding. And this step 3 is to choose 1 or 2 activation events. While analyzing the data, you may find quite a lot of events that lead to retention and indicate a successful activation. But I would advise to choose 1 or 2 if you are starting to work on onboarding, because it would be enough for a proof of concept and it will allow you to test the hypothesis faster. How you can prioritize the events. You can rely on the number of events. Typically, the most powerful events are the ones that the most frequently triggered. You can also rely on logic and expertise. Here it will come in handy. And if you look through events and see that the most frequently used feature is the one that doesn't bring any value to user from the use cases perspective, for example, users click on the settings button a lot in the gaming app where it is absolutely unnecessary and doesn't bring any additional value, then chances are you don't have an activation event. You have a bug or UX issue with the feature. So here it is absolutely helpful to rely on your expertise. And finally, you're all set. You have chosen the activation event, and you can decide which metrics to follow besides retention. Your activation rate would be translated to a conversion to feature adoption, or percent of users completing the event in a certain time frame, or percent of users engaged with this feature a certain amount of times, etc., depending on your business. Okay, now let's discuss another method of gathering user info for defining activation event, qualitative research. What should you do if you don't have much data or your user base is very limited, like in B2B? You initiate interviews. Again, goal here is to uncover key features your users love, aka activation events. So step 1, you should choose the audience. For this step, as in the previous method, you need to select the most active users of your product. You should look out for the most frequent users, users that pay you for a long time, users that pay you a lot, users that spread the love for your product on social media or on any other platform that you know of. After you have chosen the audience, step 2 is to create a list of questions. Your ultimate goal is to find out what features create the most value for your users, why they stay with you. So your questions should be targeted at their usage routine, their most frequently used features, reasoning under choosing your product or specific functionality. As any qualitative research can be biased, be sure to ask open-ended questions and do not frame people by asking direct will you or will you not pay for, love, do questions, and always ask why to understand motivations. For this research, you would need the two basic categories of questions: frequently used features and the most valued features. And here you might argue that logically, the most valued features would be the ones that are most frequently used. Yes and no. Some features might be of significant value, but their usage cycles might be quite distributed in time as user need for the solution emerges less frequently, but still, this feature brings value to your users and it might be worth mentioning or presenting in your onboarding. Typically, the questions that you create will fall in one of these two categories, and your list of questions might include the following. Walk me through your usage routine. What features do you use and why? What tasks our product helps you accomplish? How do you accomplish them? If you wanted to describe our product to a friend, how would you do it? And why do you keep using our product? Why do you keep paying for it? And after you created a list of questions and have chosen the audience, step 3 is to conduct interviews and map the results. For these field studies, you would need at least 7 to 10 interviews, but of course, the more the better. And after you have conducted the interviews, you need to summarize interview scripts. The most straightforward way to approach this is to create 2 buckets with frequently used features and the most valued features. After that, you categorize the answers, calculate the number of mentions in each category, and choose 1 or 2 activation events. Here on the slide, you can see a sample table with 2 buckets, feature and number of mentions columns, and sample sorting. And finally, you're all set. Again, you have chosen the activation event, and you are prepared to track the performance of your onboarding projects. And now we're ready to start formulating our activation strategy after we have completed initial preparations and research. It is an important part because it helps to focus and not to forget why we started this and what we aim to accomplish. Our goal is the activation rate increase. It is your key feature adoption metric. Why does it matter? Because it defines retention. Key features we concentrate on. You create a list of 1 or 2 features. You figure it out during your research stage using data research or qualitative research or both. Method, time frame, and implementation are the things that are left for figuring out. So let's cover them in the implementation part. Method. This is how you want to roll out your new onboarding experience. I would suggest 2 methods. The first one is A/B testing. It is an ideal option with reliable and most of the times, at least significant results. But it doesn't fit for all types of businesses. Again, we have B2B with limited number of customers and users. So another option for businesses like this is 100% rollout and cohort analysis after that. It is also a good option. It is well suited for products with small user base, but both options are fine. Time frame. This is how long it will take from solution ideation to rollout. Ideally, you would want to test an MVP onboarding as fast as possible. Later, after the first tests, you can enhance and update it. So I would say up to 1 month from solution ideation to the first test would be a perfect timeline. Implementation. This is something you would want to come up on your own. I have covered a few examples in the beginning of the presentation. This is definitely a large topic worth rigorous research, but here are some tips. Research competitors. For the MVP onboarding, you might not need anything complex. It might be enough to see what your competitors are doing and create something similar for your own product. The benefit here is that your competitors have similar users, so it would be easy for them to navigate through your onboarding experience because chances are they have already experienced the onboarding flows of your competitors, so they know how to navigate. And I will also share a few resources that will help you in this research in the end of the presentation. Keep it short. You don't want to overload your onboarding with a long sequence of screens and detailed tutorials. Otherwise, you might have an opposite effect. Experiment with formats. In order to find a winning version of your onboarding, you need to test different formats. Only this way, you can find the one option that works for your product. And the last one, adopt practices from other industries. This is one of the secrets to creating disruptive features. I would recommend dating and gaming products to look at. So often they are ahead of all of us. And let's wrap up. From today's event, we learned the main goal. You need to work on your activation rate. That would be the conversion rate to your key activation event. This conversion leads to retention. How to find your key features? Through data research or through qualitative research. What method to use for releasing your onboarding? The ideal one is an A/B test. Cohort analysis works too, but with limitations. Time frame, sure, it can depend, but for the best and fast results, I would recommend having up to 1 month from ideation to the first test. And finally, for implementation, we covered several examples in the beginning, and I also shared some tips, such as looking for the experience from other industries, testing different formats, keeping it short. And as promised, additional resources for you. I will also share them in the chat. The first one is the collection of onboarding screens. It's really helpful when you're trying to look out for your competitors' onboarding flows. The second one is Paywalls Library, although it's more about monetization, but it might be also helpful for activation. And the next is Retention Playbook by Amplitude. It's a great read in a short format, definitely recommend. And the last one is a Growth Handbook by Intercom. They have a bit different approach from Amplitude, but it's also really helpful. And that's it. I'm now ready to answer your questions. I'll just look them in the chat. How many people do we need to conduct qualitative research? As I said in this part, you need at least 7 to 10 people to interview. Typically, after that, you won't hear anything new, but still situations might be different. So if you see that after 7 or 10 interviews, you're getting still new info, maybe you should increase the number of respondents for your qualitative research base. But yeah, the minimum is 7 to 10. If you have data coming from analytics tools, does it eliminate the need for qualitative research? Yeah, it's a good question. I like to rely more on data research, but I can't advise you to work only with data. The best results will yield the combination of both. You need data research to get like objective results and objective situation about the product and funnels, but you still need qualitative research to understand why your users do this, why they drop off on some funnel, what they don't like, and etc. etc. So ideal situation, you use both. Every situation you choose. I prefer to choose data, but some people prefer to choose qualitative research. And moreover, not every company can have much data to work with, so they are left only with qualitative research. How do you measure your onboarding success? Thank you for question. The the main metric for your onboarding success would be retention rate. But although it's helpful, it's not really specific. So that's why we have come up with activation event, and the conversion to this activation event will help you measure your onboarding success. And additionally, you also may track the revenue metric, and you can also track the conversion to purchase or trials, because they are all influenced by your onboarding, because without education your users won't use and won't buy your product. So the specific metric for your onboarding would be activation rate and retention, but also like the main business metrics like revenue and conversions to purchases would be also helpful here. I hope it helps. Okay, I don't see any new questions, so thank you very much for your time. I hope it was helpful. The talk will be available within 1 week on the event page, and you can contact me on LinkedIn or by email if you have any further questions for me. Thank you very much for your time. I'm now leaving the event, and you can stay if you want to discuss something. Thank you.